All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are back and ready to go. Let's get things rolling in this best of 7 series in the finale of the Ladder Wars tournament. Gonna be some good fun for that. So, yeah, let's get things rolling. We have RTK, Bob-Man and ODM Xiphos are going to be facing off in this best of 7. So it is going to be a pick 2 ban 0 for the first 6 of those games. And then the final, if we do make it all the way to 7, is going to be still that pick 3 ban 1. We got the faction pools for both sides ready to go. And I'm just going to let them know that they can start their picks. And we'll be able to get right on into our early matches. Right. So, I guess since the last time that I streamed, we haven't even done this pick 2 ban 0. Seems like it's been going for, well, definitely kind of changes things up. And just as I'm realizing one thing before we continue. Almost forgot. There, that should be a little bit better lighting. All right. So for a little background on the whole Ladder Wars tournament, this thing kind of commenced this kind of, I guess, a week ago at this point. And for all of that, we did do... we covered as many of those best of 3s as we could with what series were sent my way, and we had some very good ones at that. In the culmination of everything, the RTK and ODM forces ended up tying for the top spot and then decided to do a gentleman's fight best of 7 to decide the outcome, and just so happens for those coming in from Human Voice stream, it was pretty much the same bit for the individual champion. It was a showdown between ODM Hanodens and RTK Killing Smalls, as they both compiled up 41 wins between the two of them. Well, a demo, I did consider bringing in the Norskin outfit, but decided we'll go with it for as is for this one. Looks like Xiphos is going to be back in just a few minutes here, but we can get the first picks going and hopefully be getting into our first match before too long. It was a little bit of a scramble. I was kind of expecting that last game to last a little bit longer, but here we are, and it is good to be back. Everything's looking mighty fine so far on the stream side. All right. So for the first 2 picks for Bob-Man, we are going to be seeing him going with Chaos, as well as with the Wood Elves for his first 2 picks. And that is going to be his faction pool moving forward. So we will be marking down which is pick 2 and then kind of dropping those back to add them back to that faction pool to kind of see who is still available to be picked for each side and what they've played up until this point. The Chaos Wood Elves are fairly strong 2 factions, not a whole lot of really terrible matchups between the 2 of them, and they'll be able to complement each other in that regard. We just gotta see what Xiphos is going to be going with on his end. Kind of first picks that might come to mind, Beastmen are probably fairly decent against either one of those. Beastmen in general is a fairly strong one, but might be wanting to save that for their own double picks. So we'll see what Xiphos is going to be coming up with. Hopefully he'll be back here in just a minute. I know he did have to step out before we got underway, So in the meantime, I can grab a little refreshment. So yeah, hopefully things leading up to Warhammer 3 should be nice, good fun. I know already there's been plenty of content available for that, and in due time I will be getting my own hands onto that and we can start covering that. But unfortunately, details are going to have to be pretty sparse on my end going up into the Warhammer 3 release, but excited nonetheless. Some very fun factions coming forward. All the campaigns just in general seem like it's going to be a lot of fun. I do know the multiplayer is going to be available at start, but definitely not going to be the whole all the factions from all the games, but that is definitely going to be on the horizon. And Bob, Old World News, well, speaking of that, the setup that I've kind of got going here in the back, not going to be able to see it, but it is new and improved, so we're going to be seeing some of that in the hopefully near future. I haven't really planned out anything too far beyond that. Well, Human Boy, Warhammer 3 definitely could be released on the GameCube if you make your PC to look like one. Definitely wouldn't be too amiss there to make a build, and then you could call it a GameCube, and then sure, it could be released on that. And Xiphos is back, so we'll be able to get his picks and then hopefully get that first game underway. Should be some good fun on that end. Right. Yes, we have our outdoor streaming venue. Alex, definitely in those Norscan wastes. It gets rather cold out here, so we gotta make sure we stay all nice and bundled up and ready for that. It is definitely plenty cold out the window as well. So it is a brisk winter day, and Xiphos has made his decision. He's going to be going with the High Elves. So that is his pick for game one, and Bob-Man has elected to go with Chaos for his pick, so that means Wood Elves is back into his faction pool, and it's going to be Chaos versus High Elves, and we'll see how this one does fare. I think it's a fairly even matchup between the two. I know in the past this has been a matchup where we've been able to see some Shaggoths, but I haven't really seen a whole lot of them all too recently. Old Kolek has been rather absent from the multiplayer scene, but maybe we'll be seeing a return to that in this fight. I know Sartorial is another fairly good pick here against High Elves, as is Sigvald, so definitely plenty of options. Zark, welcome to the stream. It should be fun, as we are just getting underway between this best of 7 series. Cannot wait to see how all this does shake out. And I do need to set the maps. I guess I'm a little out of that, so it should be Shagrath's stand for that first one. That is my bad on that. So I'll just post that in chat so they'll see that going forward. It was posted in the Discord. I wonder if that's actually going to post. All right. So apparently you can do a staggered map list. Yes, prepared. All right, so Bob-Man is ready to go. Just waiting on Xiphos, then we can get right on into our first game. As we have Chaos versus the High Elves on Shagrathstan, so a wintry map to go with this fine winter day. Yeah, with this, definitely, I mean, High Elves in Game 1, you're probably not going to see them necessarily picked in the pick 2, but since it's technically a counter pick to, it was Chaos and Wood Elves on Bob-Man's side, you do see them a bit more often because they'll be able to have maybe a little bit of wider coverage and not necessarily something that is going to be too feared, so they're not going to be hard countered with the picks that they're going to be facing on that end. So again, just waiting on Xiphos, and we'll load on in to Game 1. We have plenty of good fun. Welcome, Jerry, to the stream. See if I can't pull in chat onto the other side. There we are. Looks good. But, yeah. Fairly even matchup. Probably can't go too far one way or the other. As for the High Elf side, I haven't played this matchup for quite some time, but this is probably one of the few where you can end up seeing Tyrion purely kind of as a deterrent to Sigvald, but there's definitely, I mean, a lot of other fairly good options. Hi, what is the temperature on this fine day? Let's see. It is above 0. At least for Fahrenheit, for the US standards. For Celsius, it is still below 0. A whopping 6 degrees Fahrenheit today. It's warming up from what it was, and it's going to be mighty cold in the next few days. Got some nice snow then on top of it, so definitely good to be back, fully moved into the new scene. Yeah, 3 is barely above 0. It's still above 0. You're not going to be having pain in your chest just from breathing. Just sending quick little message to Xiphos, seeing how he's faring for Army Select. Just waiting on him, and we'll be getting underway. And for those who came on over from Human Boy's stream between RTK Killing Smalls and ODM Hanadins, it was a good series there, some good fun. So let's hopefully carry that on right on over to this one. Looks like Xiphos is almost set, so hopefully the action will be commencing as quickly as we can. If I have any questions, I can answer what I can, and in terms of just overall news of Warhammer, matchups, or anything like that, I'll do what I can to answer what I'm allowed to say. Of course, I don't know a whole lot more than probably most of you guys from what has been posted. Should get some Jeopardy music playing in the background for some of the army selections here. Taking a little bit of time, but hopefully be getting underway. I know it's already been a hot minute since we got things underway. No action yet, I'm sorry to say, but for those, it just gives people enough time to join in before we get to that first match, so there's no missed action seen on those fronts. So I guess while we wait, we kind of go over a little bit more of the outlook on how the different maps are going to be. But Jonathan, yes, this is going to be starting as soon as both contestants have their armies selected, which is now. Both of them have selected their armies, and we are able to roll on in finally to game one between Chaos and High Elves. We'll have Bob-Man on Chaos and Xiphos on, and Xiphos will have the High Elves. So, and welcome, Nekvet, welcome to the stream. So, yeah, first game, Shagrath stand for this wintry day. All right, we'll switch on over to the main scene then. All right. So for Chaos, led by Bob-Man, it's going to be a very heavy mobile core, as we have Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes and some Horsemasters thrown in. So plenty of armor piercing, and I love Horsemasters. They are just a fantastic unit overall. Some Chaos Marauders for that front line. That's going to be extending all the way across, and a couple units of Chaos Marauders with great weapons to kind of chunk through some of the more highly armored High Elf units. And for the Lord, it is going to be a Sartorial, the Ever Watcher, and Sartorial is going to be rolling on in with Arcane Conduit, Final Transmutation, and Plague of Rust. We do have a couple of Chaos Chariots as well, going to be trying to deal with the infantry, and then we do have a couple of bodyguards for Sartorial himself, which is a couple Exalted Heroes, both of which just going to be on horseback. Nothing special about what they're going to be bringing, but that is going to be the Chaos side of things. So let's swing over to see what the High Elves of Xiphos have to offer, as we have up in the sky Alariel the Radiant going to be rolling in. Looks like we have Earthblood, we have Foz Protection as well, nice little addition to melee defense and armor, Arcane Conduit, and of course Star of Averlorn. You will not be leaving Averlorn without that for sure. We have a couple white lines of Trace in the front line. They do have a bit of missile resist, and they have that armor piercing to deal with the high armor of Chaos. So we have 4 units of those in total, and we have some Dragon Princes on the flank, so some very elite cavalry coming in from them. A very strong stat line overall, so actually 3 units of those in total, and a pair of Sisters of Averlorn. Definitely going for the elite units today, as we have a noble on horseback to kind of fill things out on the ground, but nothing special on that side. So that is going to be both armies, so that I can let them know they are free to start. And then we'll get right on in, both sides fully ready to go. So it looks like, both sides fully deployed. Should be some good fun, as they will be just ready. Let's see what they got in chat. Both sides saying good luck, have fun. So definitely Chaos is going to be probably playing a little bit more reserved on this end. They have the range, but they are going to have to be a little bit mindful of the Sisters of Averlorn, so they're not going to be able to get too up and close and personal with the Marauder Horse Masters, but they do have all the tools necessary to really kind of put a punishment on to the High Elf side of things, but High Elf definitely going to be probably a bit more on the aggressive side with what they've got. They definitely have the advantage in the melee department, so they want to be closing that distance as quickly as they can. Really, Chaos doesn't have a whole lot in terms of infantry. They're not going to be able to last very long against these white lines at all whatsoever. Human Boy, welcome back. You are just in time for the start of the first match. So have not missed any of the action yet so far. There's both sides closing in the distance here. Yes, no Swords of Chaos, unfortunately. Probably one of the few things in cavalry that Chaos could really come to contend with those Dragon Princes. But Horsemen, Horsemasters are going to be able to do a nice, decent job if they're able to get some free shots in. But the Sisters of Averlorn are really going to be what is going to be fairly fearful for the Chaos side. They, the Chaos Chariots, the Lords and Heroes, going to be a nice target for them, as the first volley is going to be landing smack dab into those Exalted Heroes, while the other ones are going to be firing in on those Chariots, doing some nice, decent damage so far, as the front line does get underway, as the Marauders clashing with those White Lines. White Lines really doing quite well in that regard, just trading out very effectively as the center engagement is going to be getting going, as both the Exalted Heroes, Sartorial, and the Chariots are all diving in against that front line of the High Elves, so Alarielle the Radiant and these Dragon Princes getting in, as we do have a final transmutation about to be going down on top of these units. Looks like it is centered on Alarielle herself, able to clip some of these Dragon Princes before they're able to kind of clear things out, but in response is that Star of Avalorn going to be healing them up as best they can, but they're going to be pulling right out, chasing down Sartorial, but it's going to be kind of pulling them out of that star just a bit, but they do get kind of dragged back in by Sartorial. Sartorial is taking a decent amount of damage, but the High Elves are taking a lot in return. Alarielle and that Noble are outnumbered here. Both of those Exalted Heroes doing excellent job there, but in the meantime, the Sisters of Avalorn are going to be able to kind of get some decent shots in. Dragon Princes peeling off these Chaos Marauders as they do try and get on to those ranged units, and a few units are going to start putting pressure as these Marauder Horsemen throwing axes is going to be going right through the middle as the other Horse Masters dive onto the Sisters of Avalorn, and some are going to be kind of keeping these Dragon Princes occupied, getting a little surround out here, but these Dragon Princes should still be able to do really well in this engagement, especially with Alarielle in support. Two Dragon Princes especially shouldn't have too much of a problem dealing with these horsemen, and then it's going to kind of leave these Sisters of Avalorn a little bit out of the engagement. The Chaos Chariots can be trying to shut them down, but so far it is a kind of a clash across the board as Sartorial taking some decent damage, but Alarielle the Radiant getting some more heals off for the High Elf units, able to kind of heal things up. Alarielle the Radiant's getting some heals, the Dragon Princes, but a lot of elite units, so any damage that the Chaos can do is going to be definitely felt pretty heavily by the High Elf side of things. And Sartorial is kind of a tough spot. He is getting focused down by one of the Sisters of Avalorn as the Chaos side is just trying to shut them down in the back, but the Dragon Princes so far have done really well at kind of keeping them alive and firing. They haven't really taken too much damage. If we kind of swing out to the far side, a few units kind of running from the heal, and finally a decent charge into the Sisters. Alarielle Radiant is going to be here to kind of peel off these Marauder Horse Masters. A good job there. Things are definitely looking very good for the High Elves. This, so for the most part, has pretty much boiled down to keeping these Sisters of Avalorn in a decent spot, and really able to just keep Alarielle safe, though she has taken a decent amount of damage. She's been able to mitigate as much of that incoming damage as possible. And yeah, the Dragon Princes themselves have just been doing exceptionally good work at this point. Things looking very strong for the High Elves in the late game, even if Alarielle does fall here. Sartorial is very low himself, and things are just sitting in a pretty dominant position for the High Elf position. Is just, I think they were Chaos just outmatched on all fronts. I think they probably played it a little bit too aggressively for the most part. We do get a final transmutation by the looks of things in the center, doing some nice work to those Dragon Princes, able to break one of them, and the other two are sitting rather low. I just don't see any good way for Chaos to really drag things back at this point. Trying to get another heal down by the looks of things, but unfortunately was not able to get there. But we do get a very juicy Star of Avalorn in the center ranks, going to be healing things up, and that is going to be our first game as Xiphos takes the lead. So we'll update that scorecard and take a look at the after battle report if that does end up loading. There it is. So for the High Elf side, Alarielle, the Noble, doing excellent work, 1374, and all of the white lines able to get some decent value there, but the Sisters of Avalorn, not as high a value as I was kind of expecting. The Dragon Princes, on the other hand, did very well. I mean, 1800, almost 1800 on these guys, 1300 on them. As for Chaos, the Marauder Horsemen, Marauder Horse Masters, I should say, not doing all too great, neither did the Horsemen with throwing axes, and these guys really need to use up their ammunition. They were definitely probably a bit too aggressive there. They had that range, they had the numbers to kind of try and pull apart the High Elves. I know they were kind of worried about the Sisters of Avalorn, but you needed to play against them a lot more cautiously because they were able to light up units like Sartorial, who did get a ton of value, 3,500 with those final transmutations, and there's some good, decent melee engagements, both of the Exalted Heroes on the other hand, not as great, but we'll switch back between scenes as we get ready for our next pick. Next one is going to be on, I posted up, MP Peak Pass, so a rather, I mean, one of the largest active map in the game for, I mean, there is Crossroads, but that isn't really a multiplayer friendly map. It's a little too devoid of anything. Let's take a quick little look at chat here while we wait in on the next engagement, as Xiphos does take that initial lead, 1-0. So yeah, for this next round, it is Xiphos going to be making his 2 picks. Bob-Man had that for the first round. He went with Chaos and Wood Elves, and Xiphos countered with High Elves. So for our next one, still waiting on picks there. Okay, it is Xiphos' turn for picks. Oh, right, Human Boy. Let's see if I can add that midstream. I'm not sure. Good to have at least someone around. Let's see. We have... So, Xiphos was initially thinking going Wood Elves, Dark Elves, but he's having second thoughts there. He's going to be going with Wood Elves and Beastmen, so we'll update that and see if we get a little downtime between Army Select. So it's going to be Wood Elves for one of his picks, and Beastmen is going to be his second for the pick pool. And now it is turn for Bob-Man to make his decision on who he wants to play into either of those. Let's see here. Well, that's unfortunate. I don't know if I can... Looks like I cannot add you... Uh-oh. Oh, now that's unfortunate. Okay, so, yes, Ben the Barman. So the pick and bans, it's pick 2, ban 0. So what essentially that's going to boil down to is you can pick 2 factions. No bans whatsoever, but from those 2 factions, you can play either one of those, and then the counter pick, they'll be able to pick one faction against either one, and then you get to pick from your initial 2. So slightly different from how things have been. Normally there's been a pick 1, ban 2, but this way it's kind of allowing you to cover the weaknesses of either faction, and it's just something that I think has been being tried as of late. But in return, from the response from the Wood Elves Beastmen, Bob-Man is going to be selecting Empire for his faction here in Game 2. And that is going to now boil down to what Xiphos is going to decide to go with. I think either one probably pretty decent. I would maybe edge towards Beastmen in this matchup. Yeah, I think that's kind of been the norm from... trying to say when that was. I know on Antiquity Ladder that's pretty much been how it as of someone else would have to pipe in on that one. I'm not sure how long that's been implemented, but a fairly decent amount of time, probably at least a couple months, I'd say. But I mean, kind of like you, I've been kind of out of the scene for a while, and it's good to be back though. It does look like Xiphos kind of flipping between the 2, but he's going to be going with Wood Elves here in this matchup, and definitely for this map, I think that may be actually the good pick there, because it does, actually this goes over here, so that, because that, with the size of this map, it's MP Peak Pass, and that is just going to allow so much space for the Wood Elves to maneuver, to do what they do best, and that is with kiting, trying to pull them apart. So definitely going to play towards their advantage versus the Beastmen, which is a much more of a rushing faction, and they would have quite a bit of ground to cover. All right. So for Empire versus Wood Elves is going to be our Game 2 matchup. Definitely been probably, I mean, historically in the past, the Empire has definitely had some strong tools. Knights of the Blazing Sun do very well against the tree units of the Wood Elves, able to do some decent damage on that. But with the Wood Elves, especially the implementation of the Sisters of Twilight, things have kind of shifted maybe a little bit more towards even on that front. It's going to be exciting to see what this, and definitely with Xiphos on command of the Wood Elves is going to be a very fun sight there. He is very proficient in that faction. Yes, Mug definitely has some beverages in it today. Keep things, the voice as smooth as we can with a little bit of nice cool refreshments on this wintry brisk day. Looks like we have both sides ready to go, so we're going to be rolling on into Game 2 as we load on in, see what they have in store for us for now. Welcome, Loopy. I'm sure I know who you're going to be rooting for. Fellow ODM member, clan member of Xiphos. So, let's get things organized here. And we'll switch that scene over. Start going over the armies. So, for the forces of the Empire, we are going to be seeing Marcus Wolfhart on the field with Hunter's Snare as the only ability he is going to be bringing. We have an Amber Wizard with the transformation of Kadan, and a Bright Wizard with Burning Head. Just all three of those on foot, and against the Wood Elves, that's probably the way to go. Those foot characters are able to, especially in comparison to horse characters, they just take a lot less damage from the arrows of Kurnus. We do have triple Huntsmen in that, actually 4 Huntsmen can be spread out for the range units. Now, these guys don't have necessarily the range that the Wood Elf archers have. They only do have 160. We have spearmen and swordsmen in that front line. Just a little bit of chaff units, and then on the flanks, it's just going to be some rather run-of-the-mill Empire Knights with some Knights of the Blazing Sun. Just a single unit going to be in the back. They have that fire damage, and then some more infantry kind of rounding things off there. But now, as for the Wood Elf side of things, we'll kind of slide over to see what we've got. So we got Deepwood Scouts for that. Now, these guys have 180 range, 360 fire, so they're going to be able to play really well for that kind of kiting. And we have 2 great Stag Knights rolling in for the heavy hitters on the cavalry, and these guys going to be rather fearsome foes for any of the Empire cavalry. They will have to be very mindful of those huntsmen, so as long as those Empire Knights are and the Knights of Blazing Sun are able to kind of stay within range of the huntsmen, they shouldn't be able to have too much to fear. We have a Waystalker, we have the Sisters of Twilight with Conjoined Destiny up in the sky. It looks like they also have their own version of Arrows of Kurnus with the Eagle Quiver, and of course I'm expecting that to be on the Waystalker as well, so he does have that Arrows of Kurnus as well. And for spellcasting, it is a Spell Singer of Life with, it looks like, Earthblood and the Awakening of the Wood. So just some kind of AoE healings, no regrowth, even though those great Stag Knights definitely would benefit quite a bit from there. Infantry, just going to be some Dryads and some Eternal Guard, going to be just kind of sitting well in reserve. I don't think they're going to have too much to worry about, though we're just going to see if the superior numbers of the Empire Cav is going to be enough to kind of bypass these great Stag Knights and get onto these Deepwood Scouts, because if they are not able to get do exactly that, then this Wood Elf build is going to have the time of its life trying to keep things just kind of slowly picking apart the Empire forces. Initial arrow Kernus going down, trying to look like snipe out that Bright Wizard, but not exactly the most accurate of abilities, and is going to be falling a little to the wayside. He's going to clip a couple of the Knights of Blazing Sun, as we see a few of those models have been dropped on that end. And the Sisters of Twilight going to be trying to get some shots in, but they're not going to be wanting to stay too close to these Huntsmen. They get a volley in return, with the Huntsmen with their anti-large missiles will put quite a bit of hurt onto those Sisters of Twilight. And here is that opening volley from those Deepwood Scouts, doing a nice bit of damage to those Huntsmen. And they're going to be trying to get some shots in return against these Great Stag Knights, but they are going to be on top of it, going to be able to dodge that first initial volley, and they're going to be getting another one off in return. And those Huntsmen are definitely feeling that pain early on in this fight. A couple of volleys is all it's going to take to get these guys wavering, and another volley will be able to kind of push them out of that ring of Empire forces, as that volley does go out and in. Going to be landing a little bit off to the side though. Good micro, keeping those Huntsmen moving on that end, as this Twilight just kind of plucking away on the side, just trying to avoid getting focused down by too many of the Huntsmen, and being this far over, not a whole lot can respond, even if Marcus Wolfhard is able to kind of get in for that Hunter snare. As the shots just continue to kind of slowly work their way in. And now some shots going to be starting to focus down the Bright Wizard, as the Waystalker going to be singling out the target that he wants to be dealing with. Really kind of, that's kind of probably a good tool to get rid of, kind of one of the big chaff clearing units. And once that Bright Wizard is taken care of, they'll be able to work a lot more freely. They'll be able to kind of breathe a little bit of sigh of relief in terms of just kind of keeping their unit safe, and don't have to worry too much about keeping things as staggered as they can. And Empire is just going to be trying to push forward as much as they can, but the Wood Elves definitely have the advantage of the range, and I'm wondering at this point if the Empire really needs to start trying to be a bit more aggressive. I know they don't want to be getting too far forward, but at this point they're just going to allow these Deepwood Scouts to just fire in and just pepper down these Huntsmen. These Huntsmen just are not going to be able to get in range of these Deepwood Scouts. It looks like we might even be getting a decent free charge off from these Great Stag Knights onto these Swordsmen. Huntsmen are going to try and respond, get some shots in, and the Great Stags are going to be pulling out just before that volley does land, and they're going to be able to avoid all of that incoming damage. And Wood Elves just continue to play it nice and safe. The only unit, the Waystalker here, maybe getting a little bit forgotten, is right up and close and personal to the rest of the units, is going to be getting charged down by these Empire Knights, but that is going to pull these Empire Knights in front of these Deepwood Scouts, and these Deepwood Scouts definitely going to be unleashing their arrows to where they were. They are able to kind of pull out once again to get free of those incoming shots, as the Knights Blazing Sun now going to probably be one of the more particular units to focus down, the most expensive cav for the Empire on the field, and they take a few shots to the face, as now the Empire Knights are going to be getting more aggressive, trying to push in, and both of these Great Stag Knights here are lying in wait, ready to countercharge into these Deepwood Scouts, and that probably would have been a charge that the Wood Elves would have gladly taken from those Empire Knights, with those Great Stags so close. Sacrificing one of the Deepwood Scouts to eliminate two of the Empire Cavalry would have been very nice indeed, but the Waystalker is going to actually end up getting routed off, getting way out of position, and does end up shattering. And even the Sisters of Twilight, though, have taken a lot of damage themselves, kind of taking these volleys up in the sky. Don't want to be taking too much. I know they do have Conjoined Destiny, so they can get that healing back. So if they just take enough volleys at this point, I mean, considering how low they are now, while the battle is kind of in a slower state, it might not be the worst idea to try and proc that Conjoined Destiny a little early on, trying to get things going, as the shots from the Wood Elves able to kind of pluck away more at the Huntsmen, as they just continue to just kind of slowly move forward, as the Wood Elves are going to be pulling back, but both sides are just going to be playing it as cautiously as they can. Empire Knights at one point did try to get a little bit more aggressive, and if they can just pretty much waste the shots, I mean, Deepwood Scouts have used up half of their ammunition. Balance power is still dead even. I mean, the infantry is still completely healthy, and the cavalry as well for the Empire is still doing fairly well. The Huntsmen are suffering a bit. One unit is pretty much useless at that this stage. The other huntsmen down below half health. They have been able to dish out some decent damage. To pick off of the Waystalker was the probably the best pick for the Empire at this point. And this is just kind of how this map can end up playing, just the whole size of it, as the this definitely plays very strongly into the Wood Elf playstyle in general. Great Stag Knights looking to be able to get a little bit more aggressive, going to be getting a charge in on to the Swordsman, and the Huntsmen, though, are going to be able to get a decent volley off in return. You just see that health bar already taken a decent amount of chunk off of it from that volley, that anti-large missile fire. Earthblood going to be cast in response, healing these guys up. I think it may have also clipped the Sisters of Twilight there, getting them a little bit more healthier in the meanwhile. At this point, the Wood Elves definitely trying to kind of maneuver their way around behind, try and circle their way back and start working their way down the length of the field. But here is going to be some interesting fighting as the Hunter Snare goes down on these Great Stag Knights. Empire Knights dive in. We do get an Awakening Wood right into the middle of them, but the Huntsmen are going to be able to follow up, 2 units of which are going to be focusing down the center ranks as the Great Stag Knights are just melting under that fire, as some very expensive units taking a bit of damage and are actually going to end up routing from those volleys, and that is going to be a nice pick there. We do hear the first of the Feral Mana Cores being dropped this fight. It's actually the first spell that I think the Empire has cast so far this battle, and it is going to be probably in hot pursuit of the Sisters of Twilight. With them so low, now the Wood Elves are going to, or the Empire is going to try and use that opportunity to take them down. Empire collapses around them, keeping them on the ground, and this is going to be a very nice pick if the Empire can deal enough damage, and it looks like the Sisters of Twilight are going to be going down. Just a single volley is going to be all, and down they go. A very, very nice catch by the Empire forces, being patient, paid off in the end, able to bring down both of the 2 firing heroes for the Wood Elves and dealing some decent damage to the Great Stag Knights, as only 1 is left, and the ammunition from the Deepwood Scouts is so very low, and you just see the balance power shifting in the Empire's favor at this point, and I think things are looking very well for Bob-Man here. This fight Awakening the Wood right into the middle of these Empire Knights and Spearmen, and we're going to be getting a Burning Head going right through these Eternal Guard. It's going to be even hitting these Great Stag Knights, and it's going to be doing probably a bit, more than a bit, of friendly fire, as it's just going to be roasting through the Spearmen on the Empire side, as probably not necessarily a good cast there, as it does kind of clip both sides, probably do a bit more damage to the Empire if anything else. But now the Wood Elves are in a bit more of a panic, as they have lost their ability to kite. All their ammunition pretty much spent at this point, and the descent of the Empire units are going to be coming down that hill. Second Hunter Snare goes down, going to be keeping things in place, trying to finish off the spellcasting in the last of the Great Stag Knights, and the other one has returned as well, though the volleys now from the Huntsman going to be getting a ton of value at this point, and things looking rather well for the Empire, as that balance power shifting more and more in their favor. Deepwood Scouts using up the last of their ammunition on this last unit here, as we try and get more healing with another Earthblood from that Spellsinger, but unfortunately I just don't think there's going to be enough to deal with. I mean, there's just so much Spearmen as well. Huntsmen have really pushed the Wood Elves back against the wall, as they're going to be trying to kind of pull back into the forest and try and get out, but that is still going to leave that Spellsinger a little bit less mobile. It's probably the only, well, it's not the only, but it's one of the least mobile units left for the Wood Elves, and that is going to just allow what is left of the Empire forces to get a nice little catch off. But the Dryads pushing up into these Huntsmen on this flank, able to push them back at least away from the Great Stag Knights for a little bit. Marcus Wolfheart still free to fire, as a few of the units, Knights Blazing Sun very low in terms of HP, going to be getting a decent charge into these Dryads, should be able to break them, free up those Huntsmen to start returning their fire on to these Great Stag Knights, who have engaged these Empire Knights here in the center rank, able to break them down with what little they have left. I mean, the Great Stag Knights just continue coming back again and again in this fight, and really that is probably going to be the unit to bring back the fight for the Wood Elves. Is the only thing that really can at this point. All of the the Deepwood Scouts have used up their ammunition, and the Waystalker and the Sisters of Twilight are both off the field for quite some time, as the Great Stag is going to continue charging into these Huntsmen. It is their biggest threat now, as they are able to chase down these guys, engage with them, so things might be getting a little bit of a turnaround here for the Wood Elves. But yeah, things are looking maybe not as well off for the Empire forces. They still have their 3 heroes, but none of which are really melee. Eternal Guard, both of the infantry forces, if you just kind of look out, there's really nothing left on both sides. We do have this 1 unit of spearmen. There's a few actually unit of spearmen, which are probably going to be too much for the Great Stag Knights. And so yeah, a little bit of hope, I think, for the Wood Elves is going to be lost on that. Even though they are able to deal with the Huntsmen, the infantry that is left is pretty much all spearmen, as things are really kind of condensing here. Both of the mages going to be duking it out in the center ranks, might be able to just outright rout the Spellsinger here, even though she is still sitting fairly decent in terms of HP. It looks like we're going to be getting another Feral Manticore being dropped, and with that, that is army losses. That summon pushes things over the brink. Bob-Man going to be balancing things out 1-1 in this series, so update that scorecard, and then we'll get into the after battle report. A nice long drawn out fight, but I think that was some pretty decent fun on that side. I mean, that's pretty much how the Wood Elves will play, especially on this map. Just that nice, slow, steady walk back, but unfortunately they just weren't able to do anything. They did get some decent damage in. Great Stag Knights, unfortunately, really not living up to their costs. And then all of the infantry, not going to be expecting a whole lot. Dryads actually did some semi-decent work, but kind of the big losses were the Waystalker and the Sisters of Twilight. Those two, the Waystalker just got lost probably in the micro there, as it just got left behind by the rest of the Wood Elf army. And the Sisters of Twilight took a few too many shots from the Huntsmen, only getting 662. For the Sisters of Twilight, that is a very low value on them. Empire Cavalry able to get some decent value with them, but the Huntsman is going to be where a lot of that value is. 1,400 on these guys. Marcus Wolfhart getting 1,300 himself, and some decent spellcasting, though that Bright Wizard, the one burning head that it had off, probably did more damage to the Spearmen than it did to the Eternal Guard, and then not really expecting a whole lot from the rest of the infantry, but that is going to be it for that game. So let's switch back to the between battles as we get into our game 3, and that one is going to be on... Let's see, what is the next map I had posted? And then I forgot. So the next one is Pillar of Bone. So we're going from a rather large map, the largest that we really have, to one of the smallest maps that is played kind of on the competitive level. Pillar of Bone, you don't start very far from the opposing side in this match. They are very, very close together. Yeah, Marcus Wolfhart definitely did very well against the Sisters. And yeah, unfortunately, Waystalker got a little too slow for the rest. But now we are into game 3, so Bob-Man is going to be up. Map is Pillar of Bone, as I mentioned before. And we got the map pools for him on the lower left of the screen. Gonna take a look at chat here, going through this last fight. All right. Well, rainbows for at least for campaign, it seems like Khorne is being exceptionally strong from what we're seeing. We'll see how they are in, I mean, the multiplayer versus campaign is going to be such a different just shakedown between those two areas. And from what we've seen also on just the cost of the Khorne units, their like cheapest infantry is like 750, so that's probably going to put a bit of a hamper on them, because generally going like super elite, anything like ranged is just going to generate a ton of value on those units, and they only have, what is it, the skull cannon for ranged. But I mean, we'll just have to kind of see. It's much too early to really be making any hard predictions on how the matchups are going to be going, and then even the matchups between game 1 and 2 factions, we still have at least probably a couple months before those get fully implemented. And in the meantime, probably expect at least some changes in some fashion across the board. So still very exciting to be seeing those factions. So Bob-Man has made his picks for game 3, and that is going to be VC and Dark Elves. So we got Counts and Dark Elves going into game 3. Now it's going to be Xiphos' turn for his counter. Between Counts and Dark Elves. He's got quite a few factions. Actually, Bretonnia might be a fairly decent pick into this. I mean, I personally would be more than happy to go Counts into that, but definitely a very strong pick into Dark Elves for being Bretonnia. Other than that, probably wouldn't go with Empire or Greenskins. Lizardmen have a possibility. The Dark Elves have more than enough tools to really kind of deal with that. And surprisingly enough, though, Norska is actually on the table for this one. Well, Human Boy, thanks for joining while you can. Have fun at Works. And yeah, definitely should be a fun series for the rest of the matches. And good job on the earlier stream as well. Yeah, in this kind of, especially when you get more and more games underway for this, especially a best of 7, certain factions like Counts that have some terrible matchups. Most of the, like all of the Elves are very bad for Counts, and having 2 of them off the table really does kind of help make them kind of more viable. Normally they are relegated towards countering into other factions, but going back to what the rest of options for Xiphos, Tomb Kings could be possible depending on how familiar he is with the Tomb Kings VC matchup. Skaven probably not so strong here, but instead he's going to be going with Dark Elves, which pretty much means we are going to be getting a Dark Elf mirror, because there is no way that Bob-Man is going to be picking VC into that. He could, but I would strongly advise against that. So yeah, Dark Elf mirror. Not too surprising there. Count is now going to be relegated toward a later matchup, hopefully to be seeing those guys. Yeah, so our first mirror of the day. Don't think we had any mirrors in the last best of 7 series either, so gonna be a little interesting. But yeah, when there's kind of a faction that, when you pick one faction and the faction that hard counters the other faction, like with picking VC and Dark Elves, well, Dark Elves is very strong and covers some of the other matchups that VC would be bad against. It does just kind of, like, the safe pick then ends up being Dark Elves, because then you just go into that mirror. And that's exactly what we're going to be getting here. It is going to be a rather smaller map, though, Pillar of Bone. We'll kind of see what both sides are going to end up going. I'm probably going to be fairly similar. Probably going to be seeing Morathi. Morathi Double Manticore is probably a fairly common pick with here. But we'll see how this one does end up shaking out. Should be some interesting developments, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of tell what the battle is going on, considering it is two Dark Elf factions. And they're both going to be looking pretty much the same. Might have to turn on the unit highlights just for this matchup so we can see which side is on which side. All right. But yeah, this is another Elven unit. So far, Xiphos has only played Elves in this series: High Elves, Wood Elves, and now Dark Elves. So that really does open up, especially in potentially Game 5, when Bob-Man will have his next pick. We'll be giving him that another option to go VC if he does so choose. And yeah, the High Elves, all of the cheesy High Elves and the Wood Elves and the Dark Elves now going to be off the table going after this. Yep, pretty much putting a pullover jersey on the two Elven units here so we can hopefully determine which side is fighting which side, and not just a mass of just purple units going up against each other. So if we are going to be doing Chaos and Greenskins at some point, that means Bob-Man is going to have to be on the Greenskin side of things, because he has already gone Chaos so far. So we'll see if that does end up kind of coming up, but wouldn't be surprising if it did not. It's just such a... banking on any one matchup in a series, even a best of 7, is going to be really kind of just grasping at straws there. But oh, is it showing that much, AC Baden, that I main VC my hate for the Elven factions? I'm glad that they're now being used, and maybe we'll be able to see my favorite faction play. Well, for a mirror match, both sides have definitely taken their sweet time kind of going through the army select. Hopefully get this next one underway pretty quickly. I'm already hitting that hour mark. Only got a couple of games underway. For the next historical Total War, I know a lot of people, I mean, are looking, like another medieval people would love to see, or like, I guess any remake of like Shogun, but probably for a new series, because we kind of got like a hybrid historical Total War with Troy, though saying that's historical is probably an insult to historical games. I'm trying to what would be, I mean, you could go, I mean, honestly, I think it'd be kind of cool to kind of go back to the, like, the Bronze Age Total War, a good historical one. World War I, that is an interesting Total War, but definitely I don't think is going to be seen for a while, if at all. Alright, both sides are ready though, so let's load on in. Actually, oh, I saw both sides ready up. There we go. Oof. AC Maiden, playing Elves because you hate the counts. That's no good. Alright, so we are loading in. So for Bob-Man's forces of the Dark Elves, we do have some Dark Riders going to be getting some decent cheap mobility. We do have Dark Shards as well, 4 units of those. For the infantry, we are going to be seeing a couple of Dread Spears, 4 of those in total. And then there's going to be Sisters of Slaughter, especially with this short range to go to the next army. They're going to be able to close that distance a lot quicker and really get into the front line as quickly as they can. For the Lords and Heroes, it is Morathi with a couple of Assassins as her bodyguard. She does have the one Kraton, Soul Stealer, Heartrender in the Darksword, Enchanting Beauty, and Greater Arcane Conduit. Nothing surprising there. The only thing surprising would probably be seeing her without her 2 Manticores in support. We do have a couple K-Knight Assassins as well, with Assassin Trophy and Web of Shadows for those 2. And that is it for Bob-Man's side of things. As for Xiphos, we are going to be seeing Morathi, double Manticore up in the sky, and I do want to turn on the... Let's see, is it this one? There we go. So now we can see that the colors a little bit better. So we have Sisters of Slaughter and Witch Elves going to be mixed in with a couple of Leek Swords. So going for a bit more aggressive on this, not going to be going for any of those Dread Spears, just purely on the assault for Xiphos' army. We have Dark Riders with Imperial Crossbows instead of just normal Dark Riders. Of course, those double Manticores up in the sky. Morathi coming in with pretty much the same kit, except she is not going to be bringing which one? So she doesn't have the lore passive, but otherwise has all of the other items on Xiphos' side. So that is going to be it for that. I think both sides are ready to go. I think I heard at least one ready up. So I think one way or the other, this is definitely going to be looking to be a very quick fight, as there isn't going to be a whole lot of beating around the bush on this one. Only Xiphos really has anything that would want to drag the fight out longer, but the rest of the army that Xiphos has brought is a bit more designed for quick, aggressive play, especially with like Witch Elves and the stuff. I mean, the Dark Shards on Bob-Man's side would probably benefit from kind of prolonging that frontline engagement. Want to create on going down on these Dark Shards, able to do a decent amount of damage, but they were able to mitigate at least some of that by pulling forward. But it is still a decent chunk of their HP off, and already down to 54 of the originally 68 models on them, so reducing their effectiveness and DPS early on in this initial engagement. Dark Shard's going to be getting some decent shots into those Dark Riders, able to kind of pluck them away. Both of these K-Knight Assassins just going to be kind of walking around in front, getting whatever damage that they can, while the Manticores are going to be holding off in reserve, waiting for their opportunity to drop down onto this unit. And this Feral Manticore is going to be taking that opportunity, getting a nice couple hits, a very nice couple hits onto that K-Knight Assassin. Wanda Kraton going down from Bob-Man onto that Feral Manticore. Some decent hits being dished out in return. And we'll see how this initial shot does. It is able to rampage it, and a decent hit going to be going in. Morathi going to be diving in. We get both Soul Stealers, Web of Shadows. Everything is going down in this sphere, especially the one that's getting rather low. Definitely wants to get that off while it can. And one of the K-Knight Assassins is going to drop, but that is a bunch of AoE spells going down very, very quickly, and that Feral Manticore does just completely outright drop. So that is one very formidable presence off the field as the Sisters of Slaughter engaging with one another. Dark Riders and Pure Crossbows have the advantage on this flank, able to kind of do some nice damage on there, push back those Dark Shards, and in the center engagement we do get that Feral Manticore rampage again. So it is just rampages after rampages after rampages, and Morathi on Xiphos' side is taking a massive amount of damage from the K-Knight Assassin and Morathi as these Dark Riders push forward, trying to hold Morathi down. And I think this is going to be a rather quick win for Bob-Man, as he's able to break the backbone of the Dark Elf army on Xiphos' side, are able to get Morathi down, but they do need to make sure that Morathi goes down here. They can't really afford to let Morathi escape, because a single Soul Stealer can bring her back from down, and she is able to finally drop. The K-Knight Assassin coming in from the tree line, able to get that last shot off, and seeing the squad go down so quickly, Xiphos does end up conceding. And Bob-Man does take game 3, putting him up in the leaderboard. Now is up going to be 2-1, so we'll update that score and go over the results from this last series. So for the Dark Elves, on Xiphos' side, we have 1600 on Marathi. One of the Soul Sealers was really all it took to get that much value. The Witch Elves, unfortunately, not doing all too great. And then we have the Sisters of Slaughter also not doing all too hot. So really kind of a little lackluster on that side. Well, on the flip side, Bob-Man's Dark Elves, Marathi did rather well. One of the Canine Assassins getting 1247, a ton of value there, was just landing hit after hit. Definitely did not seem to be missing, and Sisters of Slaughter on their end trading much better in the process, as the Dark Riders doing some decent work on that. So that is it for game 3. So let's load back into the main scene, and we can see what we got in store for game 4. So now Xiphos is going to be up for the next fix. Next map is going to be Schwarzhafen as we go to Sylvania. So kind of going back to chats, I know we were talking about historical Total War titles just before the series did kind of kick off for this last fight. It looks like Achilles looking to be getting back to some gunpowder. I know there's some talks in at least revitalizing Napoleon, I think. So that might be on the table, not as probably a standalone title, but I think there's talks in the mix of getting that. I'm kind of giving it the Rome treatment, kind of bringing that one back and up to par, I think. But like Shogun and I think Napoleon and Medieval would probably be like any 3 of those titles. I think people would love to see a modernized take on it. But I think in particular some things like Medieval would want a completely new title built up to par with the more recent releases of full games. But I can say that there is at least some historical title in the mix. There's historical and fantasy. What they are, I do not know. All right, so we do have picks on the next one. So Xiphos is going Beastmen and Counts for his picks for game 4. And Bob-Man is going to be countering right off the bat with Wood Elves, which I am going to assume is going to be meaning a Beastmen matchup on the horizon. Looks like Xiphos is definitely leaning that way. Would not surprise me one bit to go with that Beastman route. BC Wood Elves is just a terrible matchup on that front. Yeah, I don't think Rome. Rome remastered probably from a people would probably for a nostalgic level probably play that a bit more for a campaign. I don't recall ever seeing anything on a multiplayer standpoint to any degree on Rome remastered, especially kind of with. There was still. Warhammer was still going strong. I think Rome 2 probably still had a stronger play count than Rome remastered ended up having. I don't know, for this map, I mean, if I had said, if you had said Beastmen on Peak Pass, I would say Wood Elves definitely still had the advantage there. But for this map, Schwarzhofen's a lot smaller of a map, so Beastmen definitely have a bit more utility here. They don't have to be dragged across the entire map. Yeah, and Rusty, this chat is saved for when this thing gets pushed into YouTube. So this chat will still be here. So Achilles is going to be able to come back at any point and is going to be able to point out exactly what you said here. So again, Beastmen, or Xiphos is going to be going with Beastmen. No surprise at all on that front. But unfortunately, that does mean VC gets tabled for yet another game. So, Wood Elves, Beastmen, fairly small size map. It is not as tiny as our last Pillar of Bone, but Schwarzhofen is a little bit more restricted in terms of total maneuverability. Well, thanks, Achilles. Once again, the mug being one of the highlights of the stream. But yeah, so far VC has been attempted in the pools twice on both sides. Last two pick twos have had VC in it, but unfortunately VC still does not grace the scene's presence. I could probably fit two in here, Achilles, but it's like two would be like probably at the very top. So while we're, I guess, waiting on the army selections between these two, we can kind of go over how the series has gone so far in our first three games. So for our first one, we had Bob-Man on Chaos against Xiphos' High Elves, and Xiphos ended up coming on top in that game. However, in the second matchup of the day, Empire versus Xiphos' Wood Elves, the Empire emerged victorious as the Wood Elves were unable to fully kite away from the Empire forces. And then this last series, we had a Dark Elf mirror, and it was a very quick matchup, unlike Game 2, which dragged our patience all the way across at Peak Pass. But now we are into Game 4. You're at the halfway, or almost the halfway point, I should say. Once this battle has reached its own halfway point, will be the official halfway, if it does go all the way to Game 7. And Achilles, I know it's a decent size, but the farther back it looks a little bit smaller. So I'm not lifting up a keg every time I go for a drink, so we're not going to be fitting in more than like 1.5 into this one. I know looks like Bob-Man is ready for Game 4, just waiting on Xiphos and his Beastmen. From some matchups that I've seen recently of Wood Elves Beastmen, Beastmen definitely want to push in fairly quickly. I've seen very heavy mobility on their side, lots of Senegors, just trying to get a full surround off onto the Wood Elves as quickly as they can. Though at the Wood Elf matchup I've seen, Sisters of Twilight have pretty much been the staple here. There's not a whole lot that the Beastmen can do to really deal with the Sisters of Twilight. The Conjoined Destiny, just a decently quick and decent HP pool on them. Just they don't have anything that can take down an air unit that quickly. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Work is still many hours away on Monday, so. Well, look at that. We've waited so long, the background music has run its course. So, yeah, Mighty Fine Mug got a nice little IPA. I guess particularly Sweet Child Divine, for those in the Twin Cities, would recognize that brand a bit more. Yes, ODM Tears, Achilles. That's what sustains me. Salt and tears. Hey Hank, welcome to the stream. Only missed a few of the games so far. If they take too long, I'm going to have to refill it. I mean, my Monday morning mug is fairly large, but it is filled with coffee in that one. So that would be this one. I guess that's the one at home. And then the one at work is like triple that size that I fill with coffee before during the day. So only a few of us live in the US. I think most of the US people in RTK happen to be in Minnesota, but everyone, if you join RTA, you have to move to Minnesota. You got like 2 months to do it, and that's how it's going to work out from this point on. We're going to be enforcing that for any new recruits. All right, so we are loaded in, though, to our next matchup. So for Bob-Man on the Wood Elves, we do see the Sisters of Twilight. No surprise there, as they have the Eagle Quiver and Conjoined Destiny. Front line is going to be some Dryads mixed in with some Eternal Guard. For spellcasting, we do have a Spellsinger of Beast with just the Transformation of Kanan, is going to be sitting behind this little building here, keeping them nice and safe. For the range units, we do have just some Glade Guard, some with Starfire Shafts for some fire damage and armor piercing. For the mobility, it is going to be Glade Riders with spears, really just looking to counter the Centaur and any of the dog play that will be trying to get into this formation. And now to swing on over to the Beastmen side of things, and we will be seeing a lot of mobility on their end as well. For the front line, it is going to be just Ungor herds kind of spread out across, and we will have some Ungor Raiders as well spread into that secondary line. For the little flyers, we do have some Harpies, also going to be trying to get into that all those Glade Guard. We do have a Morgar, the Shadowgave for the Lord, and he is going to be coming on in with a pair of spellcasters as well. The Staff of Ruinous Corruption, Spirit Essence of Chaos, and he does have, of course, he is a regenerating Lord. We have Brave Shaman of Death with Spirit Leech, and a Brave Shaman of Wild with, it looks like, I think that is the Bray Scream. For the mobility, we do have a bunch of Centaurs with some Centaurs with throwing axes as well, spread out across the field, and I did see a few chariots as well mixed in, as we have 3 Tuskor chariots on that far side. So back to the spellcaster. It is, yes, it is Viletide. So that is going to be for both armies. And one sec, something. We kind of leave it at this while both sides kind of get final positions, and we can turn off those unit highlights as well, considering it isn't a mirror match this time around. All right. Actually had to cool off the lighting a little bit in the room. It was starting to heat up a bit. But the match is going to be underway. Beastmen going to be pushing forward to the pocket of Wood Elves. And they are going to be using their mobility here to probably try and get along all edges that they can. They definitely do have a bit of some low ground where they're going to be able to kind of get around, and maybe a little out of sight. I mean, the Glade Guard should have no problem firing over them, but in the meantime, the Sisters of Twilight are going to be able to get as many good shots off as they can. And really in the center pocket here, with the exception of all these Ungor Raiders, there's going to be 3 of those in total. The Bray Shaman and Morgar may be a fairly decent target, but instead they are going to be electing to use their single shot on to these Tuskor chariots, already taking 1 model out and dealing half damage to them on just the initial few volleys, and just that's going right down into the Centaurs as well, getting some decent damage there. And the Glade Guard are going to be firing away. Beastmen may be engaging just a little too early here. They will very much want to get all of their mobility into position, but it looks like it is going to be a pretty heavy flank overload on this side. Viletide goes off right into those Glade Guard, not doing as much damage as the Sisters of Twilight kind of dive down, trying to get as good a shot as they can, as these Tuskors are just going to try and push in. These Glade Guard need to be shut down by the Beastmen as quickly as they can, and they do find a nice hole in that line. Centaurs are going to charge forward, shut them down, but the Glade Riders are going to be very quick to respond and kind of pushing through onto those Centaurs and pushing them back and giving their archers a bit more free time. But while they are holding them back, they are actually able to break those Centaurs. We do have some more throwing axes coming on in as they try and get in, but the Glade Riders are on top of things, able to really peel off and do what they can. Another Viletide going to be hitting these Glade Guard off into the center, while actually some Dryads are even able to get onto some Ungor Raiders. But this pocket here, this entire flank, is where the Beastmen are just throwing in everything that they have, and everything is diving onto these Tuskor chariots right here. Unfortunately, there is no Traderkin to really punish this blob of Wood Elves, and the shots and all of the Eternal Guard just are able to deal with these Tuskor chariots, push them back, while the Chaos Spawn are able to kind of really break most of the infantry on this flank, as Morgar and all the spellcasting just continues to kind of slowly push their way in, as the Wood Elves are going to look to try and reposition themselves, as more of those mobility units being held off for the time being by these Dryads. Harpies take this opportunity to now dive down in onto these Glade Guard with Starfire Shafts, able to shut them down, as it looks like we are going to be getting that transformation to Kanan off, getting a Great Eagle summon, some nice quick mobility, hoping to try and peel things off from these Glade Guards, as the Beastmen are putting on quite a bit of pressure on to these units. And keeping them from firing, and these Centaurs right here probably doing the most work at the current time, as these Chaos Spawn just continue to just be a thorn in the side for the Wood Elves, as well as they just are really unable to really bring them in. The Eternal Guard will have no problem dealing with them, but they'd much rather be used to kind of try and screen out these Centaurs. So just tying up as many infantry units as possible is really going to help out, while the Sisters of Twilight are now going to have to elect to try and pull off these Harpies. But the Harpies did a very excellent job of dealing with both both of these units of Glade Guard, as the Centaurs are going to be able to turn around and escort them as far off as they can. So things are looking pretty decent for the Beastmen. Now, they have lost quite a bit of units overall, but they have dealt with the Glade Guard. So really, the Sisters of Twilight are going to be the last really major problem, and they are still going to be a major problem indeed, because they don't really have a whole lot of very strong units that can deal with a single entity. They'll have to try and focus them down with the Ungors, and what that means though is these Ungors need to stay alive and not use up too much of their ammunition while still having enough to kind of screen these guys out, and they are going to be kind of pushing forward, trying to support as much of the rest of the units as they can. But I mean, the infantry for the Beastmen is all gone across the board. We have a couple Ungors still around. We still have Morgur and the Bray Shaman, but I mean, the Spearmen and the Sisters of Twilight are going to be pretty strong, as that balance power shifting a little bit by little bit into the Wood Elves' favor. And considering Morgur is on the field, that means that it's probably a bit more so than that even looks, as the Sisters still have a decent amount of ammunition. Going to be pulling out, and they probably want to pull their Spellsinger as well, only using one of the transformations so far. Would very much like to get that second one off before her usefulness is at an end, while the Beastmen definitely trying to kind of eliminate at least some of that, and they're actually able to pull that balance power ever so slightly back into their favor. The Chariot does finally move its last, as that shot from the Sisters does put it into the ground. Ungors have plenty of space here at the moment. They have dealt with the Wood Elf mobility for the most part. We still have one unit of Glade Riders, and I don't think there's too much. There is one more way off on to the fringe, but their mobility has been greatly diminished. So if they can get some decent shots off, they might be able to at least kind of free up these Ungor Raiders, as some pressure coming in from the Wood Elves. Glade Guard charging on forward are going to be able to get a decent charge in, hit some of these Ungor Raiders, and both these Ungor Herds, I don't even know if they're going to be able to really push out these Glade Guard. The Glade Guard are going to be kind of electing to pull back, as these the Glade Guard with Starfire Shafts are able to kind of get some decent hits in with what little ammunition they have left. But the Sisters of Twilight are going to be trying to come to the aid, but a little too late. Glade Riders do get pushed back, with that spread shot going right into the middle of both of these Ungor Raiders. And really, these two units are probably what the Sisters of Twilight would almost do well to just dive in against on that Bray Shaman Wild as well, maybe finishing that off. But there's plenty of Wood Elf infantry left, while the Ungor herd are just trying to do what they can. But yeah, there's just probably too much pressure coming in. Even though the balance power is still pretty much dead even, a lot of that balance power is getting collapsed completely upon with these Glade Riders and the rest of the Wood Elf mobility on to these Ungors, as with them gone and the balance power, as soon as both of those ended up routing, and as well as that Bray Shaman completely shatters, yeah, you can just see that they just didn't have anything left to deal with the Sisters of Twilight at that stage. And they do emerge victorious. Plenty of units on both sides, full 20 stacks across the board. So for the Beastmen, Morgur not doing all too great. Neither did either of the spellcasters, and rest of the infantry, nothing to write home about either. Some of the Ungor Raiders did okay. And then the Centaurs got some decent charges in, but unfortunately we're not able to stay engaged for long enough to really deal with it, because they did deal with these Glade Guard for a decent amount and were able to drastically limit their capabilities. But the rest of the units did much better for the mobility on their side. And then of course we have the Dryads as well, which were able to do some decent damage. And there's probably just too much infantry for the Wood Elves, and just not enough anti-infantry tools in general. And then the Sisters of Twilight, of course, 1900 on them, and without anything to really deal with them in the end. But that is it for game 4. Bob-Man pulls the lead up to 3-1, which does mean it is now match point. So any victory now for Bob-Man, oops, I did, will seal it for him. So we'll switch back to the main screen, and we can get the lights back on. Lights were getting a little hot on that end, so I could smell it kind of getting warmer and warmer. So, yep, it is Bob-Man's pick for game 5. And for the map as well, we were just on Swarthofen, so it is now Dak Karaz. So a mostly open map. It does have a little bit of a divot down off onto one side, which does allow for anything going up against a ranged unit to kind of... Oh, right. I typed in, it was 2, and then it was... Whoops. So it was 2, and then it was... Should have been 3. I typed in 1, so I just... All over the board. There, yes, 3-1. Messed that one up. So yeah, pick 3 is only on game 7. Kind of how normally that would be the rubber match for a best of 3 or a best of 5. Yeah, definitely. Some of the audience would have preferred the 4-1, even though, yeah, it is 3-1. We still have more games left to go. So it is Bob-Man's pick. We're waiting on that. We do have plenty of factions still left in the pool. We'll see if VC are going to be making another attempt of an appearance today. Anything that VC is paired with probably will want to be good against Lizardmen, because that's like their only really strong counter against them. Anything else, I would say, them and Dwarves. So if anything like Skaven would probably be a good complement at this point if you really wanted to go counts. So instead, though, Bob-Man is going to be going Greenskins and Beastmen for his 2 picks. So some 2 very strong units there, both of which fairly similar styles overall, and both, I mean, pretty much rush factions. Both sides have some decent abilities to kind of skirmish away, but we are going to seeing how Xiphos is going to be responding to that particular one. And honestly, you could go counts if you really wanted to on this one. Bretonia, probably not as like against. That would probably be decent for Beastmen though. Dwarves, nope, wouldn't want to do Dwarves here. You could possibly do Empire if he's familiar with the matchup. Let's see, you could go try to do a greenskin mirror. Lizardmen actually probably wouldn't be too bad. I know definitely with the last Beastmen picks that they are a lot stronger against Beastmen. Historically, they've been terrible against them. But Lizardmen would at least be very good against greenskins. Instead, Xiphos is going to be going with the Dawi. As I was thinking before, like that was a fairly unlikely pick, and Bob-Man instantly going to be going with the Beastmen. So it's Beastmen versus Dawi for this next one. So we'll see how the Dawi goes, because this has been a matchup that Beastmen have always been fairly strong. Even though Beastmen haven't always been that strong of a faction, this has still been one of their matchups where they've been able to do fairly decently in. So we'll kind of see how the Dwarves are going to be able to respond to that. Because it's definitely going to be an uphill battle for Xiphos, and a battle he definitely needs a win in. I mean, just taking a look at the remaining factions that there was, I mean, Chaos probably wouldn't have been too bad of a pick. I probably would have gone with VC. Tomb Kings could have worked as well. And there's definitely options to go with. But again, it kind of comes down to familiarity with a matchup. But yeah, definitely Beastmen. I mean, you got Bestigors, you got plenty of chariot options, you got plenty of chariot lords on top of that who you can just put your heroes onto chariots, and that's just kind of been the bane of the Dawi line for so long. Plenty of armor piercing with throwing axes. Now the Dawi definitely can use, like, one of the things that the Beastmen struggle a bit more with is with kind of flyers. So like gyrocopters definitely could have a role to play here. Throwing axes are only really strong if they are like super close to gyrocopters, because then they can do a ton of damage to them, but of course the problem is getting them into that position. Oh, you can't go asking me that kind of question chasing rainbows. Not when so many of them are currently watching right now. Yeah, and Knighthood, all of the earlier games are kind of on screen on which each of those matchups were. Yeah, we'll let other people answer it, and then... I mean, honestly, Hank, I wasn't even considering that. I was thinking of 3 others. But of course, considering I would also be in that table, I would almost have to have that first one. Xiphos is ready, though, for our next matchup. Just waiting on Bob-Man to finalize his loadout. And we'll be getting into our first match point. Xiphos definitely has plenty of room to maneuver, though. We have more games lined up. He's going to need to win out, though, if he does want to take the Series 4 ODM. See Bob-Man just waiting on him. And after this match, we have Toothgrass Hill and Southern Chaos Waste are the remaining 2. So Bob-Man is now ready, though, so we can get on in to our next match. And we'll see how things do fare. This could be our last game, though hopefully Xiphos is going to be trying to pull this out for a few more games on top of that. Definitely going to be needing it. And we'll see what the Dawi have in store for the Beastmen. If their stalwart line of defenders are going to be able to hold them back on the fields of Dak Karaz. Looks like just a few maybe last second changes to Xiphos' build just before everyone was all readied up. A few changes. No worries. At least I've got nowhere to go today. I guess while we're still deciding. I guess that with their indecision, they've allowed for a bit of time to refill. At least Bob-Man is set. Xiphos was. If only we can import some Jeopardy music directly into game lobbies. At least have a mod that... There might be a mod that exists that could do that. Alright, it looks like Xiphos is also ready. Which means, finally, Game 5 can start to get underway. At least he's almost ready. There we go. Now everyone's ready to go. Finally, timer has hit 0. And we are loading on in to Game 5. The match point for RTK as Bob-Man leads the series 3-1 going into this Beastmen versus Dowie matchup. So we'll switch the scene on over. And go over the Beastmen first and foremost. So we do have triple Tuskor chariots for the Beastmen. We have Harpies up in the sky, so a total 3 of those, 2 units of Feral Manticores. We have Minotaurs with shields, and we also have some Ungor Raiders as well, and some Ungor Spearmen herd mixed into that for the Lords and Heroes. We do have Torox the Brass Bull, who does have some nice armor piercing, so a very good unit to deal with the Dowie, and a Bray Shaman Wild with Traderkin. So as for the Dowie being led by Xiphos, we have 4 units of Slayers in total. We have a couple of cannons. Now the cannons on this map generally do struggle a bit purely because of this big dip down on this side of the map where any units are going to be able to kind of approach from that side of things. And we do have a couple of Thunderers, we have some Miners with blasting charges, and then it's just going to be some Dwarf Warriors, I think some Iron Breakers as well, even on the front line, some very elite units. We're going to see how well they do. Some long periods with great weapons, so plenty of units spread across. Now we do have a Belagar Iron Hammer with nothing on him, so he's just bringing his base kit. He is just a pure melee lord at this point, just trying to save funds wherever they can. So yeah, for factions I'm looking forward to, honestly, I'm thinking Khorne is probably going to be more my style, though I do like Cathay, I think, overall as a design. I would say Khorne, Cathay, and Kislev will probably be the ones I'm more itching to try first. Or Tzeentch. Yeah, there's just so many good factions coming up that it's kind of hard to say one way or the other. So both sides do look like they're fully deployed. So they'll be able to ready up and get moving into this last one. Beastmen definitely doing kind of what you'd expect with their more elite units. So like the Minotaurs, Taurochs, all the chariots are going to be taking the approach right down the line here, going to be avoiding the incoming fire up on top from any of the cannons. They'll be able to kind of close that distance as best that they can without putting too much of their exposure across the full range of the cannons. Though if you take a look at the cannons overall, you're only going to be missing a little bit if they do dip down into this ravine. So we'll see how things do fare. Just a final couple shifts of the units as they can't quite make up their mind on where things are going to be placed. Trying to get the best coverage that they can, and Dwarves definitely putting as much space as they can between them and the forces of the Beastmen, who are definitely going to have quite a bit to cover as they will be approaching under cannon fire, thunderers, and eventually will have to hit the iron breakers and the miners to be see if they can break through. I know historically, like either Bestigors or Minotaur rush. Definitely, Xiphos I think was expecting Minotaurs and or chariots with the amount of slayers that are on the field. Because I mean, these Ungor spearmen, they'll be doing nothing but kind of absorbing any of the incoming fire, because they're not even going to probably be able to break through even a single unit of miners. They just don't have the staying power, the armor piercing to really do anything about that. Cannon's going to be pushing up as both sides are getting underway, and they'll be getting whatever shots in that they can. As they do start rigging, looks like they'll probably be targeting some of the larger units, going to be hitting some of the Harpies on the approach. So any of the Flyers and the Feral Manticores, they are able to drop a few of the Harpies on that first volley, and as they do turn their attention now to those Feral Manticores, as they're going to be trying to dodge whatever shots that they can. As the Beastmen going to be taking their time, don't need to be getting into range of the Thunderers or the Miners before the rest of the Beastmen units are in position, and they're doing exact that. Though despite that, the slant of the hill is still enough for the Tuskor chariots to start taking in some incoming fire, as they take one cannonball straight to the side before they're going to be able to get out of range of that cannon. Beastmen are going to be trying to pull the Dwarves' attention to this far side. Thunderers are going to be opening up right into these Ungor Spearmen. Not really doing a whole lot of damage off that initial volley. And cannons, though, they are doing a lot of good work against those Harpies. So those Harpies are just taking so much damage early on, and you need them to kind of hold back these Thunderers and these cannons for as long as you can. A nice charge in, though, by the chariot there. Going to be hitting those miners who are now very much unsupported so far from the rest of the field, getting some shots into these Ungor Spearmen herd as both of the Manticores now dive down onto Thunderers. The Slayers, though, are just right there to respond and are going to be able to get some decent damage in onto them, as the Slayers are also dealing with these Harpies. Harpies definitely do not want to be engaging with those Slayers, especially those Dragonback Slayers, as Torix the Brass Bull gets knocked down on his back as he tries to charge on forward, getting that distance down as quickly as he can. Now these Minotaurs definitely want to be coming in and joining in on this fight, trying to shut down these Thunderers, because these Thunderers are dealing a lot of damage to those Tuskor chariots and those rather large units, as both of the Thunderers are now still free to fire, as the Longbeards pushing forward with these Dwarf Warriors just trying to keep all of the infantry from kind of stemming in. But it doesn't look like these cannons are going to be able to stay online for too much longer. The cannons have been able to deal with these Tuskor chariots and push them back. Looks like we're going to be getting a rather nice Traderkin, going to be hitting these Iron Breakers, Slayers, and Belgar himself, doing a nice bit of damage. Might be enough to break these miners with blasting charges and free up Torix to kind of focus on more important targets on the field, as the Iron Breakers get a very nice volley onto those Ungor Raiders, going to be pretty much routing them just off of a single volley, And in the back fronts, these Minotaurs trying to avoid these Slayers, the Dragonback Slayers no less, as they charge forward. Definitely these guys want to put as much distance as they can between those Slayers, and the Slayers definitely probably going to be one of the stronger units for the Dawi. The Dawi definitely need to keep them as away from the rest of, like, especially like these Ungor Raiders and any of the regular infantry. They need to be reserved for the very special targets, and Torox is going to be in a fantastic engagement for himself, dealing with Belegar. He gets a few blasting charges to his back as the Tuskors do get a nice charge into the rear of these Iron Breakers. But surprisingly enough, Belegar has been able to tank that damage fairly well, as Torox is just unable to land any hit in that melee. He's just swinging and missing every single volley that he tries to do. But in the back, these Thunderers taking a decent amount of damage as the Dragonback Slayers just continue their pursuit around the map, trying to get onto these Minotaurs. Minotaurs have taken a decent amount of damage, and the Slayers are just going to be relentless in their pursuit, trying to get them down. And Belegar still is sitting at that same amount of HP. Torox just, this should be his, like, a perfect engagement for him right here, is just unable to land a single hit. Like, there is something up here as Belegar just continues to just stay at that same HP, as Torox just cannot land it. He finally lands a hit there, as Belegar just tanks it again and again. Slayers, Longbeards are all chasing down these chariots as the battle is kind of really spread out for the Dawi. Most of their gunpowder lines are offline, though both of these Thunderers are going to be able to kind of condense themselves, get a decent amount of shots off up onto the Feral Manticore, trying to rampage it down, in all honesty, towards these Slayers, but now it is off in the distance. It's going to be dealing with those miners. No problem whatsoever on that front, while the Dragonback Slayers and the regular Slayers making quick work of these Minotaurs, as Belegar has proved to be an excellent distraction for the Beastmen in this stages, as they drag those Minotaurs down with these Dragonback Slayers and those regular Slayers, as now Torox just going to have to ignore the chance to take down Belegar. Really does need to get out of this engagement, doesn't want to be staying with all of those Slayers. He needs to let some of his range units, but who they are themselves, are in hot pursuit by these Dwarf Warriors as they chase down those Ungor Raiders, keeping them from firing in against the Slayers themselves. And Torox is just going to be relentless, trying to finish off. He does finally land some decent hits, and Belegar is finally going to end up routing, but at what cost? Torox has spent so long this fight dealing with that, that he's been unable to really been given any assistance elsewhere where he would very much be needed, like Iron Breakers, for example. Any of the other Dwarf units would be very good targets for them, as the Feral Manticore taking quite a bit of shots from these Thunderers, and now you see a little bit of a pocket forming for the Dawi here, as these cannons are back online. All of their units going to be firing away to both of their Thunderers, Slayers, and Dwarf Warriors, all keeping them nice and safe in that pocket. And Torox is going to be having none of that, charging forward, trying to get out. But it looks like we did have the, I'm guessing the Beastmen ended up conceding there, though I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, the Beastmen did end up conceding there. Not too surprising. The Slayers, there was just too many of them left in general, as like the Minotaurs, Torox really couldn't stay engaged for too long, and all of the Ungor Raiders, which would probably do it, but I think that was probably still a little early on the calling it, probably to concede there. So the Dwarves definitely drug the Beastmen kind of around that map a bit. The Thunderers doing some decent work. Iron Breakers not as quick, but really these Dragonback Slayers, 1,700 on them, 1,000, 1,000, and 300 on the other ones. Rest of the units, nothing too special there. In Belegar, I mean, most of that was just the damage that he tanked, or that he made Torox miss, because Torox should have been able to deal with Belegar so very fast. Like, he just could not land the hits that he needed to against him. And then pretty much everything else just wasn't able to do. I think it was just too light of a front line as well for the Beastmen. But let's switch back to the main screen. So the score is now 3-2. Xiphos brings it back to within reach. Alright, so Xiphos will be right back. Our next map is going to be Toothgrass Hill. All right. So we have game 6 on the horizon. It is now going to be Xiphos' pick 2. He did say he'll be right back, so while he's taken a quick little breather, I will also do just that. So I will return in just a minute. All right, so we are back. Xiphos has made his 2 picks. So we have Bretonnia and VC for his game 6 picks. Once again, VC going to be on the docket for a potential appearance. Now, Bob-Man is going to be going with the Dwarves himself. So, likely going to be actually seeing VC here in response to that. Much better than the Bretonian alternative. And it is indeed going to be the case. Finally, we have VC in a series today. So we have Bob-Man on the Dwarves for game 6. And Xiphos will be on the Vampire Counts. So I still think this can be an uphill battle for the Counts. They are kind of limited on what they have in terms of armor piercing. Really, Graveguard with great weapons are probably their best option, because you have Cairn Wraiths. While in game Warhammer 2, they're kind of a wash because of the magic resistance of the Dawi. Game 3, that is going to be changing because of how magic resistance works, where Cairn Wraiths are probably going to be a very, very common, and is probably the one matchup I can see for sure just shifting drastically the other way. But I think Graveguard with great weapons are going to be the way to go, and we're just going to have to go back to this for a sec. All right. Yeah, I mean, other options that the Counts have in this matchup would be Vargulfs do pretty decent work, and they're fairly low profile to kind of avoid incoming direct fire. Trollhammer torpedoes are probably still a very decent threat. Slayers in general. But we'll see how things do fare. You still have to worry about gyrocopters as well as the Counts, where Fellbats can do decent work, but Fellbats can get peeled off pretty quickly by any thunder fire from the ground, or even Quarrelers. I've seen dwarf builds where they go fairly wide in terms of ranged, so lots of Quarrelers, Rangers, with some Thunderers mixed in to kind of really spread things out for the Counts. But should be fun. Definitely the Dwarves will have a little bit of a feature on the map that Toothgrass Hill has a very large hill on one side, which can potentially give the Counts a little bit of room to maneuver up and over. However, there's still plenty of distance between that hill and the deployment zone, where the Dwarves, as long as they deploy far back, won't have any problems in kind of maneuvering around into a favorable position themselves. Well, I'd say probably the biggest reason why this isn't totally VC favored is because still the Counts suffer a lot from maneuverability or of their infantry, not necessarily because like Black Knights are still fairly decent here trying to get into the back line. You have Fellbats to shut down some range, but they don't do damage. That's the thing, and Slayers are such a good tool of deterring that, while Miners with blasting charges can deal with the front line. It's mostly just like, can the Counts hit that front line hard enough? Can they break the front line? Because you still have to take some risky units or certain spells, like the Pendulum is a good tool of quickly breaking a front line. Dragon Breath attacks, but Dragon Breath attacks have the problem of now you're taking a dragon to a fight that has a ton of dwarves, or a ton of gunpowder units and Slayers, where if you're cautious with it, and you can still do a ton of damage. But yeah, it's interesting. It's like that one matchup I have with Counts where it's like it should be fairly even, but you seem to be in a bit of a tough spot overall. And both sides obviously didn't have any surefire way to decide this matchup. We have Bob-Man's ready, so still just waiting on Xiphos. I mean, for me in particular, Ben the Barman, it's just like I bring 4 Graveguard Great Weapons, some zombies, some Black Knights and Bats, and then usually a Vampire Lord on a Dragon to really deal with quick, like, elite units like Hammerers, Ironbreakers, stuff like that. One breath attack can do a lot of damage to them. But see if Xiphos shares similar styles as that. Looks like he's now ready, so let's load on in. Game 6 awaits us. So let's see what we have in store. It is still match point for Bob-Man. Xiphos was able to win the uphill battle last match between the Beastmen and the Dawi. So we'll see if he's able to do another uphill victory here in Game 6. All right. And here we are. So for the Dwarves, we'll start going over them first. We have Thoric Ironbrow. has gone off hiding somewhere, but he's going to be bringing the Rune of Slowness for a bit of control. We have the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, some nice fire damage, always good against the counts. And we have Rune of Doom, which gives plus 24 melee attack. The Fear isn't going to be doing a whole lot on this, but that plus 24 melee attack is still quite a nice little benefit. The rest of the units, we have Longbeards with great weapons for that front line, definitely expecting Graveguard, at least in some capacity, as we have even more of those, some Dwarf Warriors with great weapons mixed in. And then for the rest of the infantry, we have a couple units of Slayers. One is the Dragonback Slayers. We have Norgrimling's Iron Breakers, and we had 3 units of Iron Drakes, the Trollhammer Torpedoes, which are excellent against any of the large forces of the Counts. But otherwise, it's a fairly limited ranged build. As for the forces for the Counts, we do have some the Feasters of the Dusk. Now, normally Crypt Ghouls not really all too great because they really lack that armor piercing, but these guys do have Stock and Vanguard, so they're able to kind of maneuver, get into that backline, but against Slayers, these guys will do very well against them. Well, really, pretty much all of the Count's infantry and a Graveguard will do really well against Slayers. Rest of the Count's line is going to be zombies across the board for that front line, and then we do have Graveguard with great weapons, kind of as expected on that. Now, in kind of on the flip side now, we have some black coaches. Now, these guys do have armor piercing bonus versus infantry, however, they do magic damage. So that magic damage is going to be a little less effective against the Dawi, though they will still be able to do some decent work there. Some Fellbats in the sky and some Vargeis instead. These guys do have 100 armor piercing, but they are fairly susceptible to ranged fire. They only have 10 armor. And then for the Lord, it is going to be a Blood Dragon Vampire Lord coming in with that Helm of Discord, as well as Invocation of Heck, Raise Dead, and then, of course, he has the Breath Attack, Honor of Dead, and the Hunger for his abilities. But that is going to be it for the Counts. So let's get things rolling. So, well, potentially, Tim, that can save them from the Fear, but, like, Terror, for example, from, like, I mean, the Blood Dragon and the Black Coach, these guys both have Terror. Will prevent that leadership debuff. I mean, it's only if we take a look at the Rune of Doom, it's only for 16 seconds. But it can provide a little bit of a respite if something's getting too danger close. But nothing long range here for the Dawi forces, so they're going to be, it's pretty much a very up close and personal build. Now, the only thing that I may be a little concerned about for the Dawi is how tightly packed they are with their Iron Drakes. Really, with the Iron Drakes, you want them to be far enough separated where each of them can fire on anything that gets compromised, while not having a situation where 2 at one point, because if a single summon could probably bog down 2 of those Iron Drakes at once, not to mention anything with Fellbats and those Vargeis. I mean, Vargeis, that is going to be their target. Those Iron Drakes with those Trollhammer Torpedoes, getting them taken out of the fight as early as they can will definitely benefit, because everything else that the Counts have will be free to reign. Like the Blood Dragon, for example, get rid of those Iron Drakes, and that Blood Dragon is going to be a very happy camper, only having to worry about those Slayers. But very patient on the Count's side so far, really looking to kind of get the rest of their units kind of maneuvered around and kind of get them to a spot where they can quickly dive in onto those Iron Drakes, because at this point you have 3 units of Fellbats in total, 2 Vargeis. So if you have one opportunity, you can technically dive onto each one of these at one point and really kind of push things in your favor. So just saying good luck, have fun on that front as the Counts get into position before they finally try and close the noose around the Dawi, as the Dawi are going to be pushing forward. They really don't want to be fighting that uphill battle. They can definitely try and start shifting maybe a little bit towards this little feature here on the map. Actually might not be too bad of an idea, giving them something to kind of back themselves up against. But an initial, just a little stare down as the Dawi just kind of shift their way bit by bit, just don't want to be pulling too far out of position, because anything getting out of position for the Dawi, they definitely have the mobility on the count side to capitalize on top of that. Though there's some Graveguard with Great Weapons a little bit out of position right now. They're a little far from being able to quickly help with the rest of the formation. Yeah, the AC Band, the Felbats, if they kind of have to dive in at them from the front or from whatever direction that the Trollhammers are trying to shoot at, that's really the only way. Because they hit them at the back. I mean, that's the thing with the Dwarves in general, is they don't that guard effect. And here is that first initial charge. Vargeist diving on top of the Iron Drakes, doing a nice damage off the charge. Slayers very quickly there to respond. A summon of zombies as well, trying to pull back these Iron Drakes, but they are able to skirt around that as the Slayers push back these Vargeist. Vargeist have been taking a lot more damage. I was about to say they took a little damage from the Slayers, but those Vargeist then take a brutal volley from those Iron Drakes. We get a breath attack as well, take about half health off of the third unit of Iron Drakes, and things are starting to heat up a bit as the Slayers, though, are kind of getting pulled in different directions. These Slayers are now going to be forced to really commit to these zombies who are going to be pulling things off, and I think that was the at least a rune has gone off, and there is that Rune of Doom, plus 24 melee attack and can cause fear, so that is going to be keeping their leadership up just a little bit in contention to the fear of all of the undead. And these Felbats, they are diving down, trying to keep them under wraps, but really these Felbats probably at this point should have been kind of saved to try and anything that gets chased off. That's what they should have been used for. All the Vargeist diving into the center pocket, trying to deal with these Iron Drakes. Slayers, though, are all mixed in with the Dwarf Warriors and those Longbeards, as the Blood Dragon is instead going to be electing to kind of go for the outside edges now at this point, considering all of the ranged is for the most part occupied, even if that occupation force is kind of slowly dropping down. We do have these Iron Drakes over here starting to get some free shots in on to that Blood Dragon, getting some very nice volleys there. Vargeist definitely going to be wanting to kind of push on forward as the summons is going to start to slowly dissipate bit by bit. Vargeist coming back for seconds as they dive down into the one free Iron Drake units, and they definitely looking to keep them occupied, their mass, but they are taking some volleys from these Norgumling's Iron Breakers right into their face, but they are able to, it looks like, at least for the most part, deal with this one unit of Iron Drakes, as the Dragon, getting a nice little bit of respite, is chomping on some Longbeards here in that front line, going to be breaking this pocket, and that is going to be allowing the Sternsmen here with that Black Coach to now push right into that center pocket, getting a lot closer as that outer ring of the Dawi is starting to collapse bit by bit. We got these Longbeards broken down by these Graveguard with Great Weapons, and this other unit now is being attacked by both the Blood Dragon and that Black Coach, while the Slayers are doing everything that they can to deal with the Vargeist, but they just keep coming back bit by bit. These Slayers need to kind of come in. I know they're trying to keep these Iron Drakes nice and safe, but this center pocket is in dire straits right now. Thoric Ironbrow is holding that line. He is still at full health. Vargeist are getting broken down bit by bit, and this unit of Iron Drakes, hopefully they are targeting that Dragon. 2 units in total are trying to bring him down. And I think at this point the Black Coach as well would be a very nice target, but that avenue is now open. The Slayers are going to be forced to really contend those Graveguard with Great Weapons, and that is definitely not a fight that they want to have to take, but it's a fight that they're going to have to at this point. That is something they want the rest of the Dwarves to kind of deal with. Slayers need to be kind of preserved for the Dragon, and that is who is now very angry and trying to eliminate these pesky thorns in his side, as the Iron Drake's going to continue kind of pushing forward. Helm of Discord does go off, though, really reducing the abilities of all these Longbeards and the Slayers themselves. We get a nice Rune of Wrath and Ruin going down into the middle of those Graveguard, doing some nice bit of damage there. But both of the Slayers both sitting at about half health right now, as the Iron Drakes have been able to kind of pull out from the outskirts. We do have another unit off on this side, and is going to be hitting this Black Coach on its approach, and if they can get another volley off, doing some very nice damage to it, but it might be the last shot that they get off, though the momentum from that Black Coach just kind of pull it out a little ways, might give those guys another opportunity to turn around and fire once more against them. breath attack. Maybe not the best angle there, but it is going to be landing right amongst these Iron Drakes, and these Slayers doing some decent damage, but they will be turning their attention to the sky and bleeding that Blood Dragon dry as they do some very nice damage. And it looks like we have a little overcasted spell there. This actually, no, maybe just taking a little extra damage, but it was just a generic summon, though he is on death's door right now, and I think this is going to be the Dwarves' day. Things were looking pretty dicey in the center ranks, but we still have these Norgrimlings, which are going to be able to trade very well to these Stearnsmen. Not a whole lot of Graveguard with great weapons left. The Dragon is just trying to avoid what he can. And even these Slayers are able to keep these Iron Drakes alive as the Black Coach is going to be getting pushed back farther and farther. Another spell going off, Invocation of the Heck, trying to heal him up. He is so very low, only 400, 200 is those. Some of those shots from the Iron Drakes land, and another volley might be enough to finish him off once and for all. And with the Blood Dragon gone, I don't think there's going to be much left hope for the Dragon and for the rest of the counts. He's able to keep him a little bit healed up, so he is approaching that heal cap bit by bit as time does progress. So kind of taking a look at what is left, we do have some of the Dwarf Warriors kind of coming back, but these Troll Hammers have just been pesky units just refusing to get knocked away. That one does take a nice damage. Helmet Discord goes off, and it's just going to try and get as much damage as can. All of these units, Black Coach, Blood Dragon, all trying to do what they can, but these Slayers are just going to be dragging down that Dragon. The Black Coach is able to kind of pull its way out, but it is crumbling as well, and down goes the Black Coach, and I think down goes the Blood Dragon fairly soon as well. It is at weak binding, but these volleys from those Iron Drakes landing in, and it might just bring it down. Down goes the Dragon, and with that, that is going to be army losses. There's no way with them gone, and that is going to be that. Bob-Man is going to take the series 4-2, Game 6, as the counts do fall. So we'll update that scorecard to reflect that. And then we'll kind of go over the armies real quick here. So Blood Dragon only getting 1583. All of the zombies, nothing to expect there. Actually, Feasters of the Dusk did do fairly well themselves, getting 830. And then all of the Graveguard with great weapons doing some decent damage. Even the Stearnsmen did some decent work themselves. They will usually struggle with most of the Dowie line, but they do very good against Slayers in general. And I think the Fellbats, they probably dived in too early. I know they needed something on those Troll Hammers, but those guys just aren't that sustainable. It's kind of a last-ditch effort to kind of keep these Troll Hammers, and the Troll Hammers 1652, 1060 and 2022 on those units, and they just messed up the Count's line. Things were looking a little dicey as that front line faltered pretty strongly at the initial stages. The Ironbreakers held strong, and then the Slayers as well did pretty well, but all of the front line, the Graveguard, the Longbeards with great weapons, unfortunately were not able to do quite as much. Thoric did rather well himself with 1900, but that is going to be that. As the best of 7 series finishes off. So Bob-Man wins the day for RTK 4-2 in 6 games. So some very well fought battles there. But I do hope, I hope you guys all really enjoyed the best of 7 series between RTK, Bob-Man, and ODM Xiphos. We saw some fun matchups, and definitely looking forward to getting back into some more of this streaming. I know on the horizon for next week, we do have a clan war going to be happening on, I believe it is Saturday, the 29th. So look forward to that. That'll be our next big event. And until then, just kind of getting back into the swing of things. Glad to be here, and I hope you guys, again, hope you all enjoyed the video. And if there is nothing else, I think we're just going to be closing things off. Again, well played to Bob-Man and Xiphos today, as well as Hanadins and Killing Smalls from earlier on in the day on Human Boy's stream. But yeah, I think that's going to be all she wrote for today. Again, thank you for joining, and as always, have a good one.